So my name is Helen Allison. This is the Fandom and Community panel, which was one that I submitted because I think there's a really interesting relationship between both fan and creator and also fans between fans. So I submitted this panel to kind of explore that. Do you want to?
Yeah. I'm Hannah Berry, or some of you may know me as Earp's sister. I'm on this mostly for Wynonna Earp related, but I have been in other fandoms before this as well.
So
there was going to be more of us, by the way. So
yeah,
we just shrunk.
We've gone from 4 to 2. There were car problems and uni issues, so you're just with the two of us today. Starting off with the basics, what was the first fandom that you weren't not involved in necessarily, but the first thing you kind of fell in love with and were like, wow?
Firstly, probably Buffy. I was still only 14 when I started watching that. Got really into Willow and Tara. Started writing fanfics for that. But then the internet was really slow at that point. We were still on dial-up, so we couldn't really do very much other than that. And then it got to, after that, randomly, you're going to go, this is so random, but I got into Girls Aloud, right? So then, after that, I started doing a website for Nicola Roberts, which is one of the singers from that. And her family supported that as well, and so that became a thing. So I had a website for her, and Girls Aloud got really big into that. And then it went on to Lost Girl, and then so I joined that really late, like in the last season. Fell in love with Rachel Scarston. That is an ongoing love affair. And so I did a website for her, and now it's Wynonna Earp. So it's gone all the way through. Had lots of fandoms and stuff, but so now, yeah, Wynonna Earp.
Fair enough. So for me, my first love was probably Harry Potter, but that was from when I was like really small. So that was probably from just even like 9 or 10. And then the first fandom I entered would probably be Carmilla, because I can remember, and I didn't even, the really sad part is initially I didn't want to join. It was because all of my friends at lunch were talking about it and I couldn't interact with them without watching the show. And then I was like, oh, that's why we're watching this show. And it got a bit nuts because it was the first time I kind of started reading fanfic and then making accounts dedicated to that, just that one show, and having interaction and making friends. For me, it was a big one. It was the kind of community element. It was finding people online who we had this one thing in common, and that's where it started, but it became friendship that was without sounding kind of weird about it, more meaningful than, do you know what I mean? When you've got that relationship that's built off that one thing and suddenly becomes about all the things in your life, and all of a sudden you have a family that it just wasn't there before and that you never would have found without that first common interest. You kind of covered this a little bit, but the next thing to kind of go on to is, so what specifically was your background? So you said about the website with Girls Aloud and things like that. Yeah,
so mostly my sort of fandom interactions was with doing websites and building that up. Because at that point, social media wasn't really, when I was doing Nicola website, I think I was 20, so it's about 10 years ago, and there wasn't really social media as such. So it was more a case of everyone went on and looked at the galleries, everyone went on and did the forums, and the internet was still on dial-up pretty much, and so you couldn't have social media, the content wasn't very good. I think we just maybe had Facebook at that point. So now, like, it's a whole different ballgame, I think.
And do you think then that something like the kind of way social media has changed over the last 10 years has had a massive impact on how fandom interacts with fandom?
Oh yeah, for sure. Like, we used to have forums and things like that. But now everything's so instant as well, and you can do short little quips and things like that. And like, you couldn't load big pictures. It took too long, and you couldn't watch the videos very well online and stuff. So it is like, you can now do like YouTube and things like that. It's like a massive thing.
So
I sound really old, I know.
No, so when you say building websites, was that a skill you learned because you wanted to bring people, like, was that something that you taught yourself because you wanted to find a way to connect with other people, or was that something you already knew that you took into fandom?
A bit of both. So websites at uni I did multimedia, so I had to learn how to do a bit of websites and stuff anyway. So I saw obviously that these people didn't have websites, and I thought, oh, well, this is a way for fans to connect to those people, and in a way they used it as well. Like they would send, like, when it got to Twitter, they would retweet the links and stuff like that, so it was news and they could share it easily as well as their official stuff. Obviously it couldn't be official, but they enjoyed it as well, and they could see people interacting with it.
So yeah, it's really interesting to kind of hear that, because we had a very brief conversation then that your background is kind of in bigger fandoms, whereas mine very much came from, so you've probably all heard of Carmilla. How many people have heard of All for One? Yeah? Okay, so my background was in All for One HQ. That was something that we did initially. So it was me and a friend of mine just kind of immediately fell in love. And it started off as my friend's Tumblr account, because at the time I didn't have Tumblr, I just went on Tumblr. And she changed her URL to something for All for One. And we were searching everywhere we could find. So we were like scrolling through the internet for everything they'd done before, photos of these people, because we were like, we want to know everything about them. And so then that developed into, was like, well, if we're this passionate, somebody else probably wants to know. So if we can compile the information in one place, which is what then happened to her Tumblr account. And bless her, she had to start a new Tumblr account for her own personal blog, because the other one just became the kind of, it developed into All for One HQ. And then we had, for all intents and purposes, a place to gather and share information, but we still didn't have that place where we could chat to other fans. And I think for me, and I'm interested to hear your perspective on this, chat rooms and the sheer variety we have, from Chatovod to kind of Discord is now a massive one for me, and all those kind of things. How has that impacted on your kind of relationship with fandom?
Pretty much. I don't really use the chat rooms, actually. Back in the day, I did the forums, so that's my equivalent. But I don't actually use chat rooms. I struggle in group chats on Twitter. If there's more than about 4 people in it, I just lose the plot. So I'm more of just a Twitter or Facebook
That's crazy.
person.
I mean, like,
I
think I'm in a group chat with like 279 people. One of them is like the largest one. But yeah, okay, that's mad.
No, I couldn't do that. That's
wow.
crazy.
Okay. All right. Well, that's really interesting to hear, though. So going kind of more focusing on how specifically so when you first started building a website for what was your first fandom, did you say?
Girls Aloud.
Girls Aloud. Okay, so when you first started building a website for Girls Aloud, did you set about doing that with the intention of making a place where people could come together?
In a way, yes, because there was forums for that fandom already, but it was more like a sub-forum, so at that time she was kind of like not one of the most popular ones. So you had like your little safe area then, and then you'd store everything there. It was good. She appreciated it, because at that point they didn't have a website for her, and then I think she got a Twitter and stuff like that, and I was like one of the first people she followed that, on Twitter and stuff like that, so she obviously appreciated it.
So then, can you talk about the kind of weird experience of not in any way being official, as you phrased it, because that's such a common thing within fandom. We have this really weird relationship with, if you're well-known in fandom, you have such a weird relationship with the creators, and I think we see it in a lot of different fandoms. So can you talk a little bit about that relationship?
I mean, firstly with Girls Aloud, her parents and family communicated a bit with me on that, but going really more towards Wynonna Earp, I mean, the fandom almost is like, it's weird, like, the fandom and creators, it's all kind of turned into one, like, everyone's sharing ideas, and that's why they can't read fan fiction and stuff like that, because there's just so much of it. They're bound to take somebody else's idea in the show, and they'll be like, well, that was my idea. So it's difficult, really, like, I don't know, I'm not explaining myself very well, but the creators and I think it's hard because there's just so much out there now.
Yeah. It's interesting. I know. So from my perspective, again, going back to kind of All for One, and then a little bit onto Nottingham, which was kind of even smaller. So both were web series. So I think the max number of people that we, and when I say we, I mean like the couple, me and my friend, that were kind of being fans online with all these other people. The max number of people at any given time that we'd be interacting with would be maybe like 200, and that was it. You know, we never had to deal with anything higher than that. And that 200 was insane, but it was this weird thing, because actually there was probably a point, particularly in the early days, where I could quite literally have counted to you every single person that was a fan of All for One, who all the views were. And I can remember, I was saying to you briefly then, there was a point when people were getting in touch with the people behind the show and being like, hey, I've seen a thing about the chat room, can you tell me where that is? And they were like, yeah, we have to point you to this fan group. They actually run that. And that was a really surreal experience for us, because then we were like, oh yeah, hi, we exist. We are in no way official. And then I can remember we had the crew come into the chat room one day, and that absolutely blew things up. It got insane very, very quickly, because at that point we hadn't realised how much the fandom had grown. So there were 30 of us that quite religiously got together in the chat room to discuss things after the show had aired. And then one of the people behind the show tweeted out a link to the chat room from us and was like, yeah, we're all in here discussing the show. And then all of a sudden there were 300 people in the chat room, and we were like, oh, there's a lot more now.
I know that feeling.
Yeah, so can you maybe talk about that moment when there's that kind of first interaction of kind of, you're not official, you're never official, but that person who is official giving you that place in fandom?
Yeah, I mean, that happened with me with Emily Andress, God bless her. Basically, she was like my first guest on Tea and Biscuits. We had on episode 8 of season 1, when it aired in the UK. We hadn't had anybody on, and I just stupidly went on Twitter and I was like, oh yeah, my co-host can't come on today, to Emily. Do you want to come and be my co-host? And she said yes, and I nearly collapsed. And so she put faith into me. But then, since then, like, all the other cast have come on, and it's like, you're not official. So I always try and say like these are my opinions, they're not anybody else's opinions. Like, whatever I take, God's sake, don't take religiously. But then
the disclaimer is real when you're part of fandom and community.
Yeah, like, it's not. I don't agree with, or like, I try and be honest and stuff. Like, I don't agree with everything that happens on a show, and I don't think they expect you to. Like, no. I think it's actually more interesting for people if the creators and stuff actually say, actually, I don't really like that happened. Like, yeah. Why did you do that? I usually ask them awkward questions, and they don't particularly like it, but it's tough.
What would you say is your favourite part about the relationship that we have now versus when we didn't have this social media that we have between fandom and creator?
I think it's really strange, actually, because it's almost like before Twitter and stuff, you put people on like a pedestal. They were completely untouchable. They were just these people in the limelight. You didn't really know very much about them. And as soon as people then, it started where people start coming onto social media and they say silly things sometimes, and you're just like, wow, these people aren't like superstars or whatever. And it kind of like they makes you feel that they're more normal, which in some ways is a good thing. But then other times you're like, okay, they're not so much of a mystery anymore. And in a way, when you're younger especially, that's like, you look up to them and you think, wow. But then sometimes they do stupid things. But yeah.
Fair enough. So this is slightly more... Of the 4 panellists that we were supposed to have, there was supposed to be somebody else that was involved in web series. So this is a question that was basically aimed at myself, which was about kind of how transmedia and that idea of a character having a Twitter account or a character having a Tumblr account has changed the fandom kind of dynamic. So for me, I can remember one of the first interactions with that was through Carmilla. So we had Laura and we had Carmilla, and for the first time in my life I was like, I can ask that fictional character who doesn't really exist a question and they might answer it. Oh boy. And I can remember there was a point where I was checking those accounts religiously. Like, I had a set time each day that I'd sit down and I'd look through the new questions. And for me, a lot of the reason that I kind of began to interact with that fandom was because they put that interactivity there. And obviously now I go into things like Winona Earp, and shows like Supergirl is a big one for me these days. And they don't offer that kind of same level of interactivity, but I take that expectation of that interaction could happen with me wherever I go. And I think that was a thing that I was really lucky to have initially, was that Carmilla was my first fandom, because they showed me that could happen. Do you have any thoughts on the kind of idea of like transmedia and its relation to community?
Well, more going off the point what you said, actually, like, I'm really lucky that I joined the Winona Earp fandom right at the beginning, because they were all so fresh and new, and they had like, I remember like Dom had like 2,000 followers when I started following her, and like Kat had like 3,000 followers, so there was always like more interaction and that. But now, like, I dread to even think what their notifications look like. It's probably like just it's a lot less interactive now, which I understand they've pulled back a bit, which is fair enough because it probably drive you crazy. But I was very lucky to start with that. I'm glad I didn't come. I have like a different perspective almost on the fandom, because it was smaller and it was very much more like, it's like a family now, but it was a very little family to start with. So
how much of an impact do you think being to phrase it like that, kind of one of the first in a fandom has on your position in a community?
You kind of feel really protective. Like, I have this weird protectiveness over the show and like the actors. I'm just like, I don't want to see them be like upset or anything. You know, like, you don't want them to be like have negative things, or like, it annoys me when people are rude. Like, I feel more protective, I think, because you know what they were like when they're so young and like naive type thing, you know? Yeah. Like, you want them to stay like that, but yeah, that's pretty much it.
Okay. So I wanted to talk a little bit about kind of, we've touched on it with the internet and things, but how you went about are there any fandoms that you would say you're not necessarily a main part of, but you know who, for all intents and purposes, the big people are in the fandom, and you've gone about finding that community? How you go about that side of it?
Not so much. I mean, I like Carmilla, obviously, and I like the show, but I'm not in the fandom. Or, for instance, like Riverdale, I really like the show, but I'm not in the fandom. So, like, it's going to be weird. Like, I'm going to a Riverdale convention next year, and I'm really nervous because I actually don't know anybody. So for me, it's almost like re-entering the fandom again. Like, in Winona Earp, I feel pretty safe. Like, I know quite a lot of people. So, like, it's going to be like re-entering a new fandom it's going to be a bit weird.
That's really interesting then. So do you think it's important to have, do you think that having connections within fandom, even if it is with people you've never met, can give you a sense of safety and familiarity at things like conventions?
Yeah, I think so. Like, even now I'm just like, is any Earpers going to this convention? So at least I've got somebody, even though I don't know them, I'm just like, you're like part of that family, so I'm going to take you with me. It's fine.
Fair enough. Okay. Yeah, and then talking about kind of how, once you realised that there was, it sounds really commercial when you phrase it, but a market for what you were doing. So once you realised that there was a group of people who did want this forum space or this kind of Twitter account or any of those other things, how do you go about, how does that change your relationship as the person kind of responsible for that? So something like Tea and Biscuits, I know, is a big thing for you. So how does having almost responsibility for Tea and Biscuits change your relationship with a fandom?
It's quite scary, actually, because I don't want to like disappoint people, or like, I always have to have the disclaimer of there might not be any people coming on this, I have no idea, because in season 2 I had no guests whatsoever, and obviously I felt like, oh my god, this is like going to be a disaster, and it wasn't great. And then season 3 I've had like the whole cast on, so you kind of feel like a responsibility. You think you have to keep saying, look, this is abnormal, like this isn't always going to happen.
Yeah.
So, and then you have to be like, I don't control the rules. People are like, well, you can't take screenshots and you can't take videos and everything else. That wasn't me who set the rules. That is just the rules, and it is for the Americans as well. That's just how they want it. So I kind of have to be the dictator of that one and be like, right, I'm going to put down these rules, whether you like it or not. It's tough luck. So you kind of have to put your foot down. But at the same time, it's really nice that I can do something to make other people happy, because that's pretty much like the best feeling in the world. So like everybody's there and they enjoyed it, and you're like, great, this is amazing.
It's reassuring to hear you say that, because I know from my perspective there was definitely a point when I realised that I was genuinely treating fandom like it was another job I had, because it was like I had a schedule printed out on my wall of when I needed to post things, because it was like, this is actually now what people have come to expect. And there was one point towards the end of season 2 of All for One when I was like, oh, this is actually a job now. I was like, I've gone too far, as I'm looking around my wall schedules. Like,
my Friday nights are booked. No one is allowed to do anything on Friday night. That is it.
Oh, I have 2 jobs. That's what I'm doing. And I think, and I think it's a really, I don't know how you've felt with that or how you've dealt with that, but it's a really weird experience for me when we first started having that interaction with creators, and eventually that led to interaction with the cast as well. But how that had an impact on how people saw the show. You were saying then about Tea and Biscuits, when you got the kind of guests on, you had to make it clear that was unusual. Did it make you though still have that kind of more of a drive almost to make it slightly more professional? And for it, it's such a weird thing for me, fitting it in between kind of official and unofficial, because I can't bring myself now to call it unofficial. Like, we've posted interviews, for All for One, we've had interviews with the writers, we've had interviews with the cast, we've had the crew come in and chat with us, we've got the crew in some of our servers that we still have up now. You can't bring yourself to say, it's unofficial, but at the same time you're like, it's not official in any way, shape or form. And how do you deal with that relationship?
Yeah, it's difficult. I just say I'm like the unofficial spokesperson for the UK, I guess. I say it's unofficially because nobody's picked me. I've just gone, right, I'm doing this because there was a market for it, I'm doing it.
Yeah.
But like, I've just sort of picked myself and then hope to God people like think that's all right. But like, it's got to a point where I feel like the cast trusts me enough to then come on the Hangouts. I don't feel like they would come on them if they thought I was going to be an idiot. So it does have to be professional to the point where you're like, okay, don't ask anything rude. Like I let the ERPers ask the questions. I might just start off and then they just carry on. But the good thing what I've got now is that they can pick their own questions. So on my Hangouts at the moment, there's like a box and the actors can just pick what they want. So I don't have to be as professional because I don't have to pick the questions, but yeah. I know, like, I can't just sit there with, well, I do sit there with heart eyes, I guarantee that's true. I represent the fandom and sit there and smile at them, but you have to sort of stay like, I'm so, like, afterwards I forget a lot of it because I'm so focused on what's happening and making sure everything's working. Yeah. That's the bit they don't see, where you're like sitting there with the technical issues for 20 minutes going, I can't get this person on, and you're panicking. I'm like, no, stay professional, deep breaths.
Yeah, no, I've definitely had that moment when you're doing when I remember All for One did a live episode, and there were a lot of people who got in touch with us, because what we'd been doing up until that point was the episode was released online, and we gathered everyone in the chat room and did a streaming of it alongside, and then we went into our other chat room that was for just talking after the show. And we had people come in and were like, will you still do it for the live ep? And we were like, oh boy. So we said yes, and obviously then it's a case of making it very clear to everyone that with the live ep, if people sent in messages, it was coming up on the screen, things like that. So we had to remind everyone that's not going to happen because you're watching it in a chat room of a chat room almost.
Yeah.
And making that everyone aware of that. But at the same time, it was, you know, oh God, what if the internet goes out, if something goes wrong here, people are missing out on a live episode, and that's was way more pressure than I was anticipating in any way. And I can imagine with Hangouts, it must be a similar feeling.
I mean, for the Way Hot one, we had 500 people, and I was like, if I screw this up, this is going to be
500 people, goodbye.
Epic. This is going to be epic, because I'd had Dom and Kat on before, but separately, and both times we had internet issues where she kept disconnecting, I kept disconnecting, and it was crazy. That was season 1. The end of season 1, I think we had Kat, and we couldn't see her camera didn't work, so I had to get her on Skype. I held my phone up like this so she could see the questions on my computer screen, whilst I was talking to her through Skype, and then held the microphone next to the camera so that it was like,
it's unbelievable.
What is going on? So
yeah.
I literally sat like that for an hour and 25 minutes, and I had arm muscles like Thor, and then so I was like, this has got to work. This has got to, no pressure.
Okay.
So, and then we still had technical issues, and it took them 20 minutes to come on, but we got there in the end.
So to ask the question that is kind of less fun, what has been have you ever had a bad experience in fandom, whether that is for whatever reason, if you've blown up, someone's then horrible to you, or whether or not you've kind of got bigger and someone who is in any way official has been like, stop doing that, kind of thing. Have you ever had to deal with that side of things?
In a way, I've not really had anything much from like the cast or anything. They're just like really super supportive of everything. But sometimes like I made saying, I was really upset that they didn't live tweet in season 2 with the UK, because there was people, they were online at the time, but they didn't interact with the UK people at all in season 2, and I was like, oh, this is a bit funny. And then I had people from America and that be like, oh, well, you should be happy they do anything. I was like, yes, but that's all right for you. Like, I always try and stick up for like the UK and Europeans.
Yeah.
So I was like, no, that's your view, that's fine, but here's mine. So I had a bit of a few tiffies, and then it's just always going to be people in any fandom who take things too far. Like, they'll attack people's like relatives, or they'll be horrible about a certain thing, and you're like, why are you doing this? Like, do you not respect these people enough?
That was one we had. So after not long after the crew started quite regularly joining us in the chat rooms, we very quickly had to put a password on the chat rooms, and we did just make it A for OHQ. So if someone was interested in the fandom, they would immediately be able to know what it was, because it was literally the name of the chat room. But we had to put that in because I can remember there was one incident where we had, and I don't know if they were part of the fandom because we didn't have it again after we put the passwords on, but they came in and they said some things that were kind of quite offensive, not just in the context to the show, but to kind of people in the fandom about the kind of issues they were dealing with. And it was that sudden sense of responsibility, because for all intents and purposes, I was the person that had let everybody come to this place and then be attacked. And it is like this weird thing, because it's a metaphysical place. You know, we're not meeting up in a room and kind of going, hi guys, how's it going? And someone's not come in and yelled at us, but it is the internet equivalent of that. And you have that weird moment where you realise the level of responsibility. I can remember that being a big one for me, realising, I suppose the way I've always phrased it is professional fan, that I had a responsibility as a professional fan to make sure that other fans were okay.
Yeah. I mean, I try not to tweet too much about the negative stuff, because I do have a couple of people who follow me as well from the cast, and I don't want them to see it. Like, they probably do, and they probably don't even check their Twitter very much, but like, I try and just avoid it really, because I'd rather just, I might say the odd message about something really vague, so if they do see it, they'll just be like, well, what's she talking about anyway? But then people who are in the fandom like understand what I'm talking about. But I think it's difficult. You're always going to get bad seeds. You're just it's just the way it is. Like, as I say, like, it's really strange how it's evolved from winding up such a small fandom where everybody, like, there really wasn't a bad seed. I don't honestly think I saw any. And then since like I'd say the end of season 2 maybe, It just suddenly went boom.
Which is hilarious, because I said to you earlier, that's when I came into the fandom. Like, that was, for me, was when I got in,
people from, like, Carmilla and Supergirl suddenly just went, hang on a minute, there's this program here, like, we like this, and then everybody jumped on it.
Carmilla movie, honestly, I think the Carmilla movie was a big one, because obviously Dom was in it.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden we were like, oh, Dom exists. Let's go and look at Winona Earp now.
Would you like me to do a panel about Dominique Provo Chocolate? I probably could at the time.
So, okay, to kind of slightly bring us more towards the close of this then, if you were, what would you say is the best way to kind of going about being safe on the internet within the within a community of fans and fandom?
I think just to try and follow the right people, really. Like, I try not to follow people who are continuously negative, because it just puts you in a bad mindset and you don't want to see that. I think if you follow the right people, then, like, even if you follow, say, like, the larger, like, the groups, so you have, like, one in a podcast and one in a fans, they'll generally, if you see who they're following or who they're retweeting, it's probably going to be people who are posting positive things, because that's what they're trying to share as well. So if you find one person you like, have a look who they're following, and if you don't like them, block them. So,
fair enough.
You can do that now?
Yes, you can. So I suppose on my end it would be a case of, like I say, generally speaking, when I've been heavily involved in fandom, it tends to be smaller fandoms. So there is that element of kind of chat rooms and a closer relationship, I think. And so for me, it's always making sure people remember, you know, if you're gonna take that relationship further, you just do your basic checks to make sure you know who you're talking to. You know, you make sure you get the different things, and if it's gonna be a FaceTime, make sure you've got the fact that you know that they are who they are by having the 3 different photos with the different things they've told, you know, all those kind of basic internet rules these days. But I think sometimes it kind of goes out the window in fandom, because people are like, you like this thing, you must be like me, and then you forget that other people all aren't like you, even though they're in that fandom. We're slowly coming towards the end, because I know you've got to rush off, so I'll leave it a little bit on this then. Just talking about, what's your favourite experiences that you've had in fandom, whether with, first of all, like, other fans, then cast, and then crew?
Generally, I just like being able to do the hangouts and stuff. I just love being able to, like, interact and make people happy, generally. Like, I love it when I've done one, like, after I did, I think, big ones, obviously, was, like, Melon, Emily, and then Way Hot, and then people come afterwards.
What is it you're using for that, when you say hangouts? Okay.
So, like, the video.
Yeah.
So I have to pay for that. So it amazes me, because at the end of season 2, I did like a fundraising, but people donated, and I got like £400. I was like, this is ridiculous. Like, people donating me money so that I can do this for other people. It's like amazing. So I then use that money for season 3. So it's almost like, obviously I'll do it again for season 4, but the fact that people like it enough and trust me, I have a spreadsheet, because I'm so worried that people are going to be like, oh, well, you're using this money for something else. I'm going to have a detailed spreadsheet so everybody can see what I'm spending on. It's all like fan stuff. It's ridiculous, and just making people really happy. And then obviously just meeting the cast, it's lovely. Like, they know who you are, and it's just really sweet. Just from doing, like, I'd met Melanie for the first time like the other month, and I'd been speaking to her online since like April 2016 when I started watching it. And she's like, I feel like I know you. Like, you've been there that long. You're an OG Earper. That is a weird one. It's amazing. Like,
I can remember, actually, there was a moment when we were talking to one of the cast for the first time, and it was a funny one, because up until that point, as much as we'd been interacting with the cast and all the rest of it, our kind of big interactions, if you were with the crew, because it was the crew that go into the chat rooms and all the rest of it. And I can remember the cast coming in for the first time. They did it much later on, at like towards the end of when we were going to have the chat room open. There was about 7 of us left, and one person just came in and were like, hi, and we were all like, hi, and it was that moment when you're then having the conversation, and I just remember someone being like, yeah, it's really encouraging to see all your posts, and we were like, thanks, really glad to hear you say that, and you read it, oh my goodness. That I think for me was probably one of the most exciting ones. And fans, it's So I know through one of the chat rooms that we had off All for One HQ, I'm still in good contact with both of them actually, but there were two girls who met and they became best friends, and they got together to met in real life to watch the first episode of season 2 together in real life and things like that. And I can because I am good friends with them and we had other interests in those things, I saw that relationship develop. And there's a really kind of weird moment for me, I know, because they are good friends of mine as well, but they are best friends. And it's like, oh, if you hadn't done that initial thing in that fandom, that wouldn't have happened. Those people wouldn't have come together. And I think that's what's really magical.
Yeah, for me, it's then, in that case, it's like the meetups and stuff in the UK, because I was the first to do the meetups and things like that. So to then be able to gather together all these different people from all different parts of the country and like okay, we're going to have dinner. And then so you just sit around and you kind of know each other from the usernames, but then to be able to just sit there and just chat, it's really weird. And you don't know who's going to turn up, so you kind of put your faith in hoping that you don't get a complete nut job. You haven't had yet,
Yeah.
So touch wood. Yeah, you were there. But yeah, so it's nice, just be able to make people happy and be able to see people, get friendships and stuff like that. It's lovely.
Okay. Are there any questions from the audience? Do you have anything you want to ask about fandom and things like that? This is kind of what we expected, so that's fine. Okay, I think we're probably going to call it there then.
Yes, I should have my dinner with Kat.
You should. You do need to run a little bit.
I need to run a little bit. Okay, that's fine.
Thank you very much for coming, guys. I hope that was in some way informative.